Yeah. Good morning, everyone. The committee will come to order, and I just want to say that we're just waiting for the ranking member who has an amendment on the judiciary, and as soon as he finishes with that amendment, he will be joining us. I thank everyone for joining us this morning, and I want to especially thank the witnesses for being here today. Today's hearing on immigration and the small business workforce is a reminder that the immigrant story is the American story, and it is a story that has fueled entrepreneurship in this country for centuries. Without the arrival of countless waves of immigrants throughout American history, our economy wouldn't be nearly as dynamic or as advanced as it is today. This is because entrepreneurs have come to our shores and our borders from around the globe, all with the conviction that America is a land of opportunity, a place where if you work hard, you can build a better life, not just for yourself, but for your children, your family, and your community. Today, when we sit here as members of this committee, we cannot forget that immigration and entrepreneurship have long stood together as pillars of the American dream. So when we consider proposals to reform our broken immigration system, let us not overlook the unique challenges facing our labor market and ultimately the families who dream of working hard to build a better life in this country. For small businesses, finding and retaining qualified and skilled workers often presents its own set of challenges. And we see this across many different sectors of the economy, such as agriculture, construction, and healthcare. Without a large human resources department, small firms are put at a disadvantage in the task of finding qualified workers. And whether we talk about the highly skilled labor market or planning for temporary seasonal labor for the summer, small employers are seeing firsthand the challenges of our evolving workforce. Often, there just aren't enough domestic workers to meet the need of small companies, and they are forced to rely on foreign-born workers to fill permanent and temporary jobs, no matter the skill level. Small firms who are intimately tied to their local economies simply cannot find the workers with the technical expertise to meet their needs. Ultimately, when small firms can hire the workers they need, small businesses cannot reach their full potential, and neither can our economy. Clearly, the system can and should be working better. These are all the reasons why we need comprehensive immigration reform. For one, small businesses need certainty to thrive. Unfortunately, our immigration system does not provide the certainty and confidence our small business owners deserve. Take the unprecedented backlog at United States Citizenship Immigration Services. Last fall, the backlog exceeded 2.3 million cases, with average processing times for petitions nearly 3 times higher in 2018 than in 2014. That is 2.3 immigration cases ranging from pending green cards to work visas that sat unprocessed. But these are not simply cases. These are people who bring fresh ideas and energy, people that are ready, willing, and able to come here, work hard, and contribute to our economy. And our economy and small business sector community are desperate for these workers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects an additional 11.5 million new jobs will be created by 2026, with new opportunities in healthcare leading the way. Yet, during that same time frame, we will only add 7.9 million new domestic employees to the workforce. That is 4 million new job openings we cannot fill. This shouldn't be hard. If we cannot come together to address this issue through comprehensive and common sense immigration reform, our small businesses and economy will suffer. For years now, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have struggled to turn comprehensive immigration reform into a reality. But the hard truth is that inaction is only exacerbating labor shortages on our family farms. Inaction is only deepening the lack of workers in key sectors for small firms, including construction and housing. And inaction is deterring talented entrepreneurs with the idea that could even one day become the next Google. But this doesn't have to be the case. We're here today to discuss steps to change the reality facing too many immigrant workers and the small employers who rely on them. It is my hope that today's discussion can help identify not only issues of concern, but serious solutions for small businesses. With that, I thank each of the witnesses for joining us today, and I look forward to your testimony. I now like to yield to the
Substitute ranking member.
correct, Mr. Balderson for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the witnesses being here. I will be reading you the opening statement from my colleague, Ranking Member Shabbat, who is stuck doing an amendment, I believe, in his committee. So thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for holding this hearing today. When we speak to small business owners, both here and in D.C. and at home in our districts, we hear a similar message. The workforce shortage we are currently experiencing is having a negative impact on small businesses across the country and across industries. According to a study conducted by the NFIB, 86% of employers with job openings reported finding few or no qualified applicants for the positions they were seeking. Without access to local qualified employees, employers are looking to temporary foreign workers to fill the workforce gaps. I will add one statement for myself to go off Ranking Member Shabbat's statement here, is that he and I were walking down the street this morning and talked about the unemployment rate of the state of Ohio is now at 3.3 and how hard it is right now to find workers, especially when the unemployment. So that's a good issue to have, but it's also a negative for not having employees. So I was going to say in my statement, Ranking Member Shabbat and I having that discussion walking down the street this morning. For example, employers in STEM fields in need of highly skilled workers and specialty occupations from petition for H-1B visas. Of the 40,000 companies that submitted H-1B visa applications in fiscal year 2016, the top 20 sponsors accounted for 37% of all visa approvals. Given this trend, how can small businesses manage to secure visas when they have to compete against industry giants and Fortune 500 companies? This also affects employers in seasonal labor-intensive industries who rely on H-2B visas to ensure that they have the workforce needed to meet their industry's seasonal demands. H-2B employers are often bogged down in the bureaucratic red tape and struggle to comply to conflicting guidance from DOL and DHS. In the 114th and 115th Congress, I introduced the Strengthened Employment and Seasonal Opportunities Now, otherwise known as the SEASON Act, to provide greater marketplace certainty and to make it easier for employers to meet the demands of their respective industries in our growing economy. I am confident that reforms to streamline and simplify temporary employment visa programs can alleviate some of the strains caused by the workforce shortages. Today, we will hear about the economic impact of temporary foreign workers on small businesses and the U.S. economy. As we discuss these issues, I will be focused on one question. Are these visa programs a viable option for resource-strapped small businesses? Thank you to our witnesses for participating today. I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. And if committee members have an opening statement prepared, we will ask that they be submitted for the record. I would like just to take a few minutes to explain the timing rules. Each witness gets 5 minutes to testify, and the members get 5 minutes for questioning. There is a lighting system to assist you. The green light will be on when you begin, and the yellow light comes on when you have 1 minute remaining. The red light comes on when you are out of time, and we ask that you stay within the time frame to the best of your ability. I will now like to introduce our witness. Our first witness is Mr. Dan Wallace. Mr. Wallace is the Director of Special Project at New American Economy, a bipartisan coalition that advocates for smart federal, state, and local immigration policies that will create jobs for all Americans. Prior to joining New American Economy, he served as a policy advisor on immigration in the New York City's mayor's office. Mr. Wallace holds a Master of Education in Community Development and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, sir. I would like now to yield to Ms. Charis Davids from Kansas to introduce our second witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our second witness today is Mr. Derrick Shore. Mr. Shore is a native of Wolverhampton, England, and graduated from St. Mary's College in London with a bachelor's degree in physical education. He spent 7 years teaching secondary students in and around London before immigrating with his wife and 1-year-old daughter to the United States in 1987. They began their lives in the U.S. in Connecticut, working for what at the time was the largest soccer educational company in the country, where Derrick was the head of sales and recruitment. 10 years later, Mr. Shore and his family, which had grown at that time to include a son, relocated to the Kansas City area, which I was excited about, to start Challenger Sports with a mission to spread the love of the game of soccer to the U.S. and put smiles on children's faces. He spent the last 22 years growing the company from a few camps in the Midwest to a total soccer company, providing day and overnight camps, seasonal training programs, tournament management, overseas soccer tours, coach education, and uniforms and equipment. Mr. Shore has also been involved in coaching soccer since his stint at St. Mary's, where he was both the team captain and the coach, leading his team to 2 consecutive national finals. Congratulations. Mr. Shore has 28 years of experience dealing with immigration and work visas for his previous employer and now for Challenger Sports. Bless you. He is one of the key people involved with the H-2B program at Challenger Sports since the company began using the visas in 2002. He and his wife, Linda, officially became U.S. citizens in June of 2013. Thank you for being here, Mr. Shore. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And now I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Shabbat, to introduce the last 2 witnesses.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'd first like to introduce Nick Sabino, who is the president and founder of Deer Park Roofing Incorporated, which provides residential and commercial roofing services. Deer Park Roofing has offices in both Cincinnati, Ohio, and Florence, Kentucky. Nick currently serves as chairman of the board-elect of the National Roof Contractors Association and is slated to serve as NRCA chairman of the board in 2019 and 20. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we welcome you here today. And I'd also like to introduce Mr. Daniel Griswold. He's a nationally recognized and highly published expert on trade and immigration policy. Mr. Griswold is a senior research fellow at the, is it Mercatus? Mercatus Center at George Mason University and co-director of its Trade and Immigration Project. He earned a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and a master's in the politics of world economy from the London School of Economics and Political Science. So we welcome you here as well. And I want to apologize for being a little bit late. I had an amendment over in Judiciary, and it was my amendment, so I couldn't leave in the middle of it. So I apologize to everybody. And thank you, Mr. Balderson, for filling in for me there.
Thank you, Mr. Shabbat. And now, Mr. Wallace, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Shabbat, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and provide testimony on behalf of New American Economy. NAE is a bipartisan coalition of more than 500 mayors and business leaders from all 50 states and every sector of the economy, united in demonstrating the importance of immigration to America's economic growth and advocating for smart federal, state, and local policies that will create jobs for all Americans. In our capacity as a research organization, NAE analyzes data from the ACS and other publicly available data sources to understand national economic and workforce challenges and opportunities, as well as the role of immigrants in industries and occupations across the country. As this body of research continues to grow, one thing remains abundantly clear. Immigration is one of America's greatest competitive advantages, helping to keep our workforce younger and more adaptive to the changing needs of U.S. businesses in the 21st century economy. Immigrants not only help fill shortages in the labor market, they also create jobs for Americans at every skill level. Although they represent just 13.7% of the U.S. population, immigrants account for more than 20% of all entrepreneurs, and they start more than 1/4 of all businesses in 7 of the 8 highest growth sectors, including construction, transportation, and utilities, and healthcare. From Silicon Valley to Main Street, immigrant business owners are creating jobs and adding value to our economy. Between 2006 and 2012, 43.9% of high-tech Silicon Valley firms were founded by immigrants. Immigrants also start 28% of Main Street businesses like restaurants, grocery stores, and retail shops that make local communities more vibrant. Immigrants also play an indispensable role in the American workforce for large and small businesses alike. And as the U.S. economy continues to grow, employers are beginning to sound the alarm. In many industries, there are not enough workers to get the job done. In 2018, nearly half of U.S. employers reported that they were struggling to find enough workers, up from 14% at the height of the recession in 2010. Among many reasons, the primary challenge for the employers surveyed was simply a lack of applicants. This is true across a variety of key sectors. Between 2002 and 2014, the number of field and crop workers in America declined by 146,000, causing major labor shortages on U.S. farms. A rapidly aging U.S. population is also straining our healthcare workforce. 62.8% of home health aide administrators cited caregiver shortages as one of the top 3 threats facing their business in 2015. There are structural reasons for this. As more young people are going on to college, the size of the U.S.-born population with a high school degree or less has decreased. Among workers ages 25 to 44, there was a decline of 12.3 million people with less than a high school degree between 1990 and 2010, but the number of jobs for workers with that education level held steady. Thus, real gaps in the American workforce have opened up. There will be an estimated shortage of 3.6 million workers in labor-intensive occupations by 2024. Immigration is not a silver bullet that can fix all of these challenges, but it should be part of the solution. First, the foreign-born are more likely than the U.S.-born to fall within the prime working age range. Second, immigrants' education and skill levels are complementary to the U.S.-born. They are more likely to hold graduate degrees, but also more likely to have less than a high school degree, allowing them to help fill jobs in labor-intensive and service industries like the tourism and hospitality sector, in which 84% of all jobs require less than a college degree. In construction, foreign-born workers frequently take on the most physically demanding roles, while U.S.-born workers prefer positions that require more English language skills or experience in management or customer service. Finally, immigrants are also more likely to work unusual hours and be willing to relocate for jobs than the U.S.-born. Especially in industries like tourism and hospitality that rely heavily on seasonal labor, immigration is a lifeline that supports small businesses and the American workers they employ. In fact, 1/3 of businesses in this sector report that they would be forced to reduce their operations or close altogether if they could not hire workers through temporary visa programs. Threats to programs that provide opportunities for immigrants with work authorization to remain in the U.S., such as DACA and TPS, will only exacerbate current labor shortages and make it even more difficult for small businesses to grow. Legislation introduced in this Congress would protect DACA and TPS holders and give American business owners more certainty about their employees' futures. The Bipartisan Fairness for High-Skilled Immigrants Act would eliminate arbitrary country caps that cause lengthy backlogs in the employment-based immigration system. Expanding avenues for immigrants with education and skills backgrounds that complement American workers would help ease the acute shortages felt in a variety of sectors. Such reforms should be part of a comprehensive overhaul of America's outdated immigration system. We must ensure that our laws reflect the needs of our economy and keep with our tradition as a nation that welcomes hard-working immigrants from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Shore, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Velasquez and Ranking Member Shabbat and members of the committee, thanks for allowing me to speak to you today about Challenger Sports, which I helped found 22 years ago. We're based in Lenexa, Kansas, in Congresswoman David's district, and we're a multifaceted sports company. Our mission is simply to put smiles on kids' faces through all of the services we try and provide. Today, my focus is on our spring programs and the fall programs where we use the H2B program. We've been using this program for 15 years. We've grown it due to the needs of the clients we serve to approximately $10 million. This year, we were needing 300 workers across 27 locations across the country. This training program is the most important service we provide to our clients. They run their programs, they set them up, and then we provide them coaches to deliver the mission that they provide. Unfortunately, when we cannot provide the most important service to them, they now turn around to us and say, we're not running your tournaments, we're not running your camps, we're not buying your apparel, and we won't be going on your tours. A pretty devastating effect. We employ 160 full-time workers. In the last year and a half, we've reduced our full-time workforce by over 10%. You may say, recruit US coaches. That'll solve your problem. We go way above and beyond what the DOL asks. We advertise in all the cities that we're looking for on platforms like Indeed.com. We deal with the largest soccer membership in the country, over 18,000 coaches, and due to our relationship, we send emails to every single member of that group to ask, come and work for Challenger Sports. We pay significantly above what the prevailing wages advertised by the DOL. We just cannot find US workers. We believe it's due to the unemployment presently now, but also these positions are multifaceted, and often it's a split day. They work in the morning, then they'll work in the evening, and they do weekend work as well. Maybe not very attractive. So we go to the H2B program. This year we ran 27 locations. Before April 1st start date, we got approved 8 of our 12. We then went ahead, called all the clients in the other 4 areas and told them, we will not be delivering your coaches in approximately 6 weeks' time. The remaining 15 locations were after April 1st start dates. We received approval on 5 of those 15 on May 15th. We received 45% of the required need. When we applied for those April 1st visas, we applied at 12:01 January 1st. Unfortunately, the DOL website crashed. We applied exactly at the same time as every other company, and there were 95,000 visa applications for 33,000 visas. The reputation of our company, after being a leader in the industry, is becoming extremely tarnished. The clients don't trust us. The workers we offer work don't trust us anymore. And this year we estimate there'll be 80,000 youngsters not being coached by us. Congress needs to act now. We cannot go forward promising our clients and our workers something we cannot guarantee. It's embarrassing. It's unprofessional. With the economy rebound and more need for seasonal workers, the current regulations do not allow companies like us to fulfill our need. Congress must act now to raise the cap to a level that helps business like ours plan and fulfill the needs of the youth of today. If this does not occur, we have a strategic meeting in 4 weeks. We certainly don't expect an answer in 4 weeks, but we're already looking at downsizing significantly the company we've grown. I appreciate your time and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. Mr. Sabino, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
And the members of the committee. My name is Nick Sabino, and I'm president of Deer Park Roofing in Cincinnati, Ohio. I now serve as chairman of the board-elect of the National Roofing Contractors Association, and I'm testifying on behalf of NRCA today. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to discuss the need for immigration reform that meets the workforce needs of small businesses and the consumers we serve. Deer Park Roofing was founded in 1996, and we currently employ 125 professionals. Our goal is to grow our business and meet the needs of our customers, but the biggest obstacle to growth is the inability to find qualified applicants. We currently recruited several new employees through our career and technical outreach program, but still need 10 to 15 more to keep up with our record backlog of work. We have worked hard to develop innovative solutions to the challenges of recruiting new employees. We created an employee development program which focuses on skills assessments, mentoring, promotion from within, and providing career paths for all associates. We now work with 3 technical schools, 3 high schools, and 7 recruiting partners. Chronic and widespread shortages of qualified workers are the most significant limitation that my company and other roofing contractors face to grow our businesses. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, job openings in construction increased to 360,000 in March, the highest level ever recorded. NRCA estimates workforce shortages cause an estimated 7.5 to 15 billion in annual lost economic activity. This problem will become even more severe in the future due to an aging workforce and other demographic trends. The large number of job openings that we face has a negative impact on production and wages across our supply chain. Manufacturing and distribution were basically flat in 2018, primarily due to the lack of workforce. We are being forced to turn down work, which is causing slowdowns in both residential and commercial construction. To address this situation, NRCA is pursuing a 2-track strategy. First, expanding and improving career and technical education opportunities, and second, supporting immigration reform that meets workforce needs. Regarding the first strategy, NRCA has developed Pro Certification, a comprehensive program that aims to promote professionalism and expand career paths for new and existing workers. We believe the success of Pro Certification will help attract more Americans to a career in roofing. But no matter how successful this effort is, we know it will not be enough to fully address our workforce needs given the demographics our country faces. This is why NRCA supports immigration reform that addresses the workforce needs of small businesses like Deer Park Roofing. I will outline a few steps Congress can take to meet this goal. NRCA supports the Workforce for the Expanding Economy Act, H.R. 1740, legislation designed to meet workforce needs in roofing and other industries that require critical skilled workers. It would establish a 2-track system that matches willing employers with willing temporary workers and provide more visas in times of economic strength and less during downturns. It will ensure employers undertake vigorous recruitment to hire U.S. workers first, while also enabling job creators to obtain the workers needed to meet consumer demand and grow their businesses. NRCA believes H.R. 1740 is vital to the future workforce needs of the roofing industry and urges members to co-sponsor this innovative legislation. NRCA also urges Congress to provide a permanent solution for employees now working under temporary protected status and individuals who came to the U.S. as minor children and are now undocumented, many of whom are in the DACA program. I especially want to thank Chair Velasquez for her leadership to address the TPS issue through the Dream and Promise Act, H.R. 6. My written statement contains more details, on why the need for TPS reform is important to the roofing industry and many hardworking individuals. To conclude, workforce shortages are the single biggest challenge facing the roofing industry today. NRCA urges lawmakers to work on a bipartisan basis in support of reforms to our immigration system that address both the workforce and security needs of the American people. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Sabino. Mr. Griswold, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Velasquez, Ranking Member Shabbat, and members of the committee, thank you for holding this hearing today on the very urgent need to reform the U.S. visa system to meet our needs in the 21st century. High-skilled immigration is a fundamental driver of wealth and job creation in the United States. The H-1B visa has been an integral part of a U.S. immigration system that, for all its shortcomings, has been the on-ramp for immigrants to become permanent contributors to American society. H-1B immigrants are more likely than native-born workers to file for patentable technologies. Immigrants constitute 18% of the adult workforce, and yet they account for 28% of the high-quality patents that are filed each year, patents that raise the productivity and wages of native-born Americans. Attracting skilled foreign-born workers is especially important for America's healthcare industry. 1 in 4 doctors in America today is foreign-born. That ratio is higher in rural areas. With baby boomers like me retiring in large numbers, our nation is going to need something like 90,000 new doctors between now and 2025. Without adequate doctors and nurses, Americans are going to face longer waiting lines and inferior service for healthcare. And yet, our H-1B visa system, only 4% of the visas go to workers in the medicine and health field. Immigration is an important issue for small business, as we've just heard this morning. Small business owners face the same challenges as employers in all your districts in finding workers under these tight labor conditions. Immigrants play a key role in meeting the workforce needs on such important small business sectors as hotels and restaurants, construction, landscaping, retail and services, not to mention family farms. Yet, small enterprises typically lack the expertise they need to navigate the complexities of the immigration system. The immigration system has become noticeably more restrictive in recent years. Approval rates for H-1B visas awarded in the lottery have dropped significantly, and as a result, applications for H-1B visas have been trending downward. Meanwhile, the existing cap of 65,000 regular H-1B visas is the same it was in 1990 when Congress established the program, 65,000 regular visas. The number of employment-based green cards has been frozen since 1990 as well at 140,000. That's despite the growth of the U.S. labor force, the arising of the information technology economy. Since 1990, our economy has added 38 million additional new jobs. The number of jobs in professional, scientific, and technical services has more than doubled since then to 9.4 million. The number of jobs in the healthcare field, hospitals, ambulatory care, that's almost doubled to 12.9 million since 1990. Yet the number of H-1B visas and employment-based green cards is still frozen where it was when Congress set it in 1990. Let me suggest 3 important reforms today. 1, the H-1B cap should be raised to meet the demands of the U.S. labor market. The number of regular H-1B visas should, at a minimum, be doubled to 130,000. That would meet the growth in the labor force of those sectors that are most in need of high-skilled labor. A tripling of the number of visas would be even better, 195,000. That would meet the kind of revealed demand each year. You wouldn't have to have the lottery allotment where small business often comes out on the short end of getting those visas. A higher cap should contain an annual escalator tied to the growth of the high-skilled labor force, and the cap should be repealed altogether for the healthcare sector, as it is in the university and nonprofit sector already. 2, the number of employment-based green cards should be increased. The cap of 140,000 should be at least doubled to reflect the growth of the labor force that is most in need of high-skilled workers. On top of that, the spouses and minor children of the primary green card workers should be exempt from the cap. And finally, the per-country quotas on employment-based green cards should be repealed. The quotas discriminate against immigrants based solely on their place of birth. They deny legal permanent resident status to well-qualified candidates who've already proven their value to their employers, the U.S. economy, and society. In closing, America is competing for the best talent in the world. And without reforms, we are increasingly in danger of losing that competition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griswold. And now I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Wallace. And let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here and for, making sure that when we debate immigration, that people see more than just the border issue and look at this in terms of an economic issue, and that is exactly what we're doing here today. Mr. Wallace, it is often said that low-skilled immigrants put a downward pressure on wages, thereby hurting American workers. However, according to the latest figures, we see that these low-skilled workers are in higher demand than ever, and in some cases driving up wages. If there's space in the economy to both bring in low-skilled workers and raise wages for blue-collar Americans to fill these open positions.
Yes, I believe there is, and I've seen additional research showing that looking at when in metropolitan areas, when the share of less educated immigrants in a metropolitan area rises by 10%, there's a growth in the number of new businesses established in those areas of more than 2%, including more than 2% for small business establishments. So actually growth in this population spurs growth in the business sector, which ultimately creates jobs for more Americans. There's also, I think, an understanding that businesses that are not able to find workers to fill certain roles may be left with the only choice to them is to take their businesses offshore. And so certainly having access to a workforce, whether that includes U.S.-born or immigrants, would allow those companies to remain in the U.S. and to employ more Americans here.
Thank you. Mr. Sabino, the roofing industry is one of the hardest industries to work in and has an ongoing shortage of workers, which you discussed. You mentioned the challenges the industry is having finding younger workers to join the industry. Without the use of temporary visa program, would your company or industry be able to meet its workforce needs?
No, we wouldn't. And I would say that we have a comprehensive career and technical education outreach. And when we're in these schools, we have 3 full-time employees dedicated to these types of outreach programs. We have a training manager who onboards employees. Roofing industry safety is of critical importance. So somebody can't just get on a roof on day one. Mm-hmm. They have to go through training. We have to teach them manufacturer's details. We have an administrator. We have an HR director. So a staff of 3. With all these recruiting partners. We have partnered with construction management schools. But when we're in the career and technical education section, and there's 40 students in there, 20 of these students are going to join the trades.
So let me... Yes, yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry, finish.
I'm getting to my point here. We might get a piece of that pie that's 10% of those individuals. 2 of those, so we're going to get 2 out of that recruiting partner. One of those employees is going to be with us after 90 days. We need 10 to 15 people. When we did our budget this year, we understand how many people we need. We're doing everything we can, and there is a positive return on investment there, but we can't get to the that number without.
Has the industry tried to raising wages or increasing the benefits you provide to attract younger workers?
Absolutely, absolutely. Our wages have gone up significantly over the last 3 or 4 years, 40%, 50%. The wage range for a a roofing installer is anywhere from $16 to $35 an hour. I think that's probably as much as one of your staffers is getting paid or more, but we don't see a wave of staffers coming to join the roofing industry.
Thank you. Mr. Shore, can you please speak to the uncertainty that the current employment-based visa creates when annual caps are reached or when there are backlogs at the agency, for example?
Hopefully I stressed the frustration. We are very fortunate. We have a great person working for our company that every morning will get up and she will look at the announcement from DHS on where they are in the cap. Us just waiting for that morning to know that this year 10 of our applications did not get through. Obviously, this is just really is very poor for the morale of the whole company because our regional salespeople out in the field, they're the people who have to get on the telephones and tell these clubs when they've got 1,000 youngsters all set up for their program, they're not going to get any professional coaches. Oh, and by the way, you will still be running our camp in the summer where we get 100 youngsters. So it's just very, very difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Shore. My time has expired, and if there is a second round, Mr. Griswold, I do have a question for you. The gentleman from Ohio, ranking member, Mr. Shabbat, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And since we didn't get the Griswold, I'll go there first and go down this way with a question I'd like to ask everybody. I've been a supporter, the principal supporter on the Republican side on the H-2B program over the years, and also support of H-1Bs and considering an increase, et cetera. I have gotten some criticism from folks who will argue that a couple of things. One thing, that if we just paid folks more, we have a little under 4%, which is a lot better than it usually is, 4% unemployment. So we've been heading in the right direction, but there's still almost 4% of the people that aren't employed. So their argument will go, why I shouldn't be supportive of programs like this is because A, all you have to do is pay people more, pay Americans more, and they'll take the work or get the training, et cetera. And B, they'll say that that our, for lack of a better term, our safety net is too generous. We allow people to get unemployment too long, or we allow housing, whether it's Section 8 housing or others, or food stamps or health care. We have a lot of things that will give people who aren't working, and so they will take advantage of those things and therefore not work. I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm saying that these are arguments that were used against those of us that have supported these types of programs. So what would your response to those things be? Mr. Griswold, I'll start with you there.
And Congressman, thanks for those questions and for your support over the years for good immigration reform. Well, first off, wages have been going up, but there is a limit. If wages go up too high, the business isn't profitable and investment goes elsewhere. In some businesses, they have the option of offshoring, importing the goods. People look, if wages go up, prices then also go up, and consumers will look elsewhere for other products. And let me echo what Mr. Wallace said a moment ago. If companies can hire more workers, they'll hire more middle managers and salespeople and others, middle-class jobs for native-born Americans that complement that. So, and in the H-1B, high-tech, wages have been going up for engineers and others, and the unemployment rate isn't 4 or 3%, it's 2%. It's rock bottom low. About the welfare and the safety net, and you're a good fiscal conservative, and I understand the question. Immigrants don't qualify for a lot of programs. If you become a green card holder, you are, for 5 years, you don't qualify for those programs. Your relatives have to sign an affidavit that they'll support you. And we all know from experience, immigrants come here to work. They don't come here to go on welfare. Recent BLS figures showed that the labor force participation rate of male immigrants is 10 percentage points higher than native-born Americans. It's 77% versus 67%. Immigrants come here to work and to save and build a better life, and we should facilitate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sabino.
Sure, I would agree. I would agree with what Mr. Griswold said, and I would also say that we have been increasing our wages across industry-wide. One thing that also is increasing is our backlog. Our backlog's at record levels, and it's really unfair to consumers that have to wait. If you call for a roof leak, you have to wait 6 weeks. If you want a new roof, you're going to wait 12 weeks. So that's increasing. We have 2 employees. Shane Gibson, employee at Deer Park Roofing, he worked 60-plus hours last week. His coworker, Bo Huff, has worked 60-plus hours the last 2 weeks. These American workers, the immigrant complements these American workers, and these guys would like to spend time with their family. They don't want to work 60-plus hours a week. So,
Thank you. Mr. Shore?
Yeah, we would actually love to pay more money to the American worker if we could find them, because all the extra expense that we actually have bringing in the foreign workers is significant. Our challenge is, as I said in the statement, our typical work is not the 9 to 5 day. It might be 2 hours in the morning and then 3 hours in the evening. And then obviously the youngsters play at weekends and it's weekend work. So that's really the biggest challenge that we have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wallace, I don't have a whole lot of time left, but...
Sure, thank you. So I think at both ends of the skills spectrum, so in terms of STEM companies, often they're looking for people with very specific skills. Not being able to find someone for a specific role, which would be already paying quite well, can hinder them from being able to grow further and hire more American workers here. Additionally, sort of in the agriculture sector, we've worked with a farmer in Texas, in Lubbock, Texas, who had to destroy 10,000 acres of crops because he couldn't find enough workers. Certainly, I know that he would have paid workers more if he could find them, and now other people in the transportation who are sort of moving those goods across the country have lost their jobs as a result. Immigrants are also consumers, so they hold $1.1 trillion in consumer spending power. So it's not just that they're filling key roles, but that they actually can create more jobs by spending to support local businesses.
Thank you. My time's expired, Madam Chair.
The gentleman's time has expired. Now we recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Innovation and Workforce Development, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sabino, thank you for being here and sharing about the specific issues that the roofing industry faces. In my district, Kurt and Susie Boyd own Academy Roofing. I think you might know them. I do. And they have shared many of the similar concerns that you raised here today. In fact, just last week, Kurt went to complete an estimate at a condominium community and determined that the project would cost $500,000 to $750,000. That'd be business for his company. And sadly, he said, and I quote his words, he said, "It would have been a perfect fit for our company, and it was absolutely painful to pass on the opportunity," because he just simply did not have the employees to complete the job. So Academy Roofing has actually recently gone from 85 to 50 field employees because they haven't had any success attracting new employees for all the reasons you described. So it's my understanding that the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, or Perkins, did not contain any provisions to train immigrants. And it's pretty clear after hearing what you and some of the others have said that we're leaving value on the table here. We're not growing businesses. We're not contributing and giving back to the economies of our communities in the way that we can, and that we can't address our labor shortage without immigrants. So how could we strengthen Perkins to include training for immigrants, and do you see that as a viable solution here?
Yeah, I do. Kurt's a friend of mine, so I feel his pain. We have similar situations where we're turning down work, we're raising prices, there's long wait times for roofing services. So what the NRCA has done is created a program called Pro Certification. And we're working with Career and Technical Education now. We've had meetings over the last month with leadership of these organizations to get our Pro Certification program in, to give roofing workers across the country a certification, a symbol. We need to start respecting ourselves. We need to start respecting the American trade. The Career and Technical Act, thank you for everyone that supported that. We really appreciate it. I think that what we're doing with our pro certification is really going to make a big impact on the individuals, but that would fit perfectly into what you're saying. So,
I'd welcome others' thoughts as well, Mr. Griswold
Not on that particular program, thanks.
and Mr. Shore. No. Mr. Shore, you mentioned, you talked about the challenges of seasonal work, and actually held a roundtable just a few weeks ago with a number of farmers, fruit and vegetable growers in my district, who expressed similar concerns in that there are challenges in not only getting the quantity of H-2 visas, but getting them in the times when you need them. And one of the solutions they proposed, and I know that you're not in the agriculture industry, but they had proposed moving the process from Department of Labor and DHS to USDA, so trying to better situate it in a place where they could understand the nature of seasonal work. Do you think there's a lack of kind of understanding of the seasonality in the temporal element of the visa program? And if so, would moving the programs to areas that would better understand that help, or do you have any other solutions?
Yeah, I think Congress should take the lead in this and not DHS. It's quite interesting that the cap for the first part of the year, which is October 1, where that starts, which are mostly the ski companies, there is never a cap issue in there. But then April 1st, when obviously there's not a, we're pretty unusual in this field, but you've got the agricultural people, you've got the landscapers, the weather is better for the roof people. That cap is obviously met within 24 hours. So personally, I think it should be Congress's decision, and I think they can look at the need, and obviously this year, to receive 95,000 applications for 33,000, to me is a pretty simple solution. That's 3 times the need of what we get. And then when we actually got the additional visas, it actually took DHS 11 weeks to give a further 30,000 visas, and at that point they limited it to to returner workers. So companies like ours, when we realized there could be a shortage, we used our first visas on our more experienced people, and then when the cap relief was given, we scrambled, and we've managed to find 45 other returner workers. So it's just not a very good understanding of the situation.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn, ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Shabbat, and our witnesses for being here today to testify on the immigration and small business workforce. As a small business owner and businessman for over 34 years, I know firsthand how valuable legal immigration practices are to our workforce. I feel your pain. This includes knowledge about various visa programs like H-1 and H-2 visas. Like several of my colleagues, I fully support these programs and think they're a great tool to supplement our workforces in various industries such as hospitality and agricultural industries. First question is just simple yes or no. Each of you have discussed these programs in your testimony, something I'd like to ask you about. Now, would each of you support legislation which increases the number of H-1, H-2 work visas, expands the number of green cards, and lengthens the DACA eligibility? We'll just start, Mr. Wallace.
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Just to qualify
Yes.
it, as a 501c3, we don't endorse specific legislation, but those are great ideas.
Okay. So I thank you for all your answers, and I find it interesting you say this because this exact proposal was included in legislation last Congress. This legislation was introduced by former Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte, was known as Goodlatte 1, Goodlatte 2, and we jokingly say Goodlatte 3, kind of an amalgamation of all. It was voted on last year. Many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle had the opportunity to vote on these specific reforms and voted against them. It is strange to me that people who claim to be so supportive of certain policies but then voted down them when presented them in legislation. It's the craziness of this place. Unfortunately, it was not strange to my colleagues who did this last year. I want to ask you another question. Again, being a business person that has almost 1,000 employees that are kind of across all the industries, entry level to executive level. about E-Verify, a program that I've always supported and wish, I've used a lot in all my small business for a number of years. E-Verify is a very successful program which allows enrolled employers to confirm the eligibility of their employees to work in the United States, and has helped me to easily verify the identity and employment eligibility of new employees. I know it sometimes seems contradictory that you'd want to do something other than I-9, but I think you all would agree, as people who represent the business, who hire employees, know that I-9s are a fallacy if we think we're keeping illegal workers out of the workforce in America. You don't have to answer that. I know. This also helps to ensure that best labor practices are for those jobs, and illegal workers are usually given better conditions than illegal workers. Not by the employer, most part. There are some bad actors, but certainly how they're housed and how they figure out how to stay illegal. Would each of you agree that tools like E-Verify can be beneficial in ensuring legal employment and the best working conditions for Americans? Well, what's your thoughts on E-Verify? Mr. Shore, I'll start with you.
I think it's a great system as long as it doesn't become, like many of our systems, it's so clunky to deal with that small businesses have to add employers to deal with that situation. I agree, the I-9 system for us, in the next 4 weeks, we actually bring in J1 visaed people to work on our camps, and to have our local people fill an I-9 in, forward it to our corporate office, have them locked away, is a challenge to say the least. But what we have to be careful is we don't make the new system so clunky that people barely use those as well.
Yeah, I will tell you, having used E-Verify for a number of years, it's we need to have either or. I-9s are a waste of time. They don't serve the purpose that was originally intended. Mr. Sabino?
Yes, we currently use E-Verify, but it's inconsistent. It's not necessarily used across all construction industries. So, but we currently use it.
So to your point, it's really a disadvantage for somebody who wants to do a better job of understanding who's here legally. Those who don't use it may have a propensity to have people come to work for them. Even though we're all required federally to use I-9, people come to work for them that could possibly be not legal in the United States.
Well, it's not required, so a lot of people don't use it. If you're working on a government project, it is required. So again, it's just inconsistent throughout all construction.
So you would advocate for it to be consistent across everybody, so we have a level playing field.
Sure.
Okay. Let me conclude here because I don't want to go over my time here. I thank you all again for being here. As I said, I feel your pain. Regardless, no politics are being played when you're a small business person. You're trying to survive, figure out the nuances. You live on the other side of the legislation that comes out of this place, the state houses. It's very, very difficult to create jobs. All you want to do is you come up here, tell your story, create jobs, put Americans to work, and just live a prosperous life for you and your employees. So I really appreciate you. I've said this many, many times before. I really appreciate the witnesses, regardless of which side of the aisle they're representing, because you tell us what really matters in America, that 70% of the jobs in America are created by people like yourselves. I thank you so much for what you do. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Davids, gentle lady from Kansas, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Well, I am especially excited today to have Mr. Shore here from Challenger Sports, which is a successful small business in the 3rd District in Kansas. Mr. Shore has spoken to an issue that I've heard about from a lot of constituents in Kansas, and businesses in my district are definitely suffering due to the Department of Homeland Security's slow and insufficient releases of the H-2B visas, which Mr. Shore already touched on a little bit. Local economies suffer when small businesses can't provide the goods and services that happen because of these long waits and insufficient visa releases. And we need a better, more efficient system for admitting temporary non-U.S. workers to combat the shortage that many of the businesses and folks who are testifying today have spoken about. Mr. Shore mentioned in his testimony that the portal had an issue and actually crashed during the attempt to get his visas on January 1st at 12:01, that there was a crash at that point. I feel like that is actually highlights this constant disruption that business owners are facing, whether it's landscaping, roofing, companies like Challenger Sports. And so, Mr. Shore, I would love to hear you speak a little more as a small business owner who's in Lenexa, Kansas. Can you elaborate on, in addition to the crash of this site, some of the other challenges that you're facing? I'm particularly interested in how this business that is in Kansas is impacting local economies across the country.
Yeah, obviously as time goes, the H-2B is an interesting beast that we deal with, and we have an incredible attorney that works for us. They had 35 of their employees sitting in their office at midnight on New Year's Eve. I'm not sure too many people would have done that, so that they could literally press the electronic button to put through all our visas. Unfortunately, as time goes on, everybody is doing that, and just the amount of stuff that went through the system, it just couldn't cope with it, so it literally crashed. It took them 7 days to correct that, and then obviously at that point, that's when that day there were 95,000 applications. As Congressman David said, we work across 27 parts of the country. We work in Colorado, we work in Oklahoma, we work in Florida, and our impact is really nationwide. We're corporately based in Kansas, but then we have satellite offices in the other areas. So we believe we are providing great services for the whole country as a whole. But as we've said, it's getting to a point that we are feeling, unless we have a guarantee this year that we will get the H-2B visas that we require, then we're discussing stopping the program totally, because it's just harming our reputation significantly. And that would greatly affect the company as a whole, and layoffs would be significant, not just in Kansas, but across the country.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Shore, you made a great point earlier about the timing of the caps for the visas and the seasonality of that. Mr. Sabino, I'm curious if you have thoughts about the timing of the caps, and even if it were increased to 100,000 H-2B visas, if they were split evenly, would that cause any issues for your company or your type of company?
So our companies, our NRCA companies, our member companies, there's a lot of contractors that are currently using H-2B visas. My company, we're in Cincinnati and we work year-round, so the H-2B is more of a seasonal issue for us. But H-2B is important for us, but it doesn't meet the workforce needs. The cap is so small. The amount of increases for H-2B is so minor that it's not making a significant impact and benefit to small business.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back, and now we recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Hagedorn, for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Witnesses, appreciate you being here. I'd like to first acknowledge a good friend of mine who's in the audience, Kirk Garrison, who I grew up with in Truman, Minnesota. Kirk is a small businessman. He's a teacher, educator, and also a veteran of the Air Force of the United States. And he plays trumpet for the Gary Sinise Lieutenant Dan Band, and they do wonderful things for our troops, raising money and entertaining them. So it's good to see you, Kirk. Thanks for that. Hey, I support a lot of these programs and am supportive of the concepts of what you're trying to accomplish. But I think that sometimes what gets lost is the problems are exacerbated because of bad government policies, mostly at the federal level. You talk about you want to bring in more people and visas, and that's fine. But we have a problem in our nation with people overstaying their visas. We don't criminalize people like they do in almost every other country around the world for overstaying visas. And we don't even know who's here years later, who's left. And I talked to some people just this morning from the Department of Homeland Security. And so we need to do a better job on that. I know the president has been working on that, and I'm going to support him any way possible, but I think that would be helpful to gaining support for what you're trying to do. Also, we have a problem on the border, and there are a lot of folks that don't just want temporary people coming here to work. They want permanent folks to be recognized to stay in America for the rest of their lives. And yet, if you don't have a secure border, everybody can keep just running over the border or flying into the country and overstaying visas and undercutting the programs, the ideas, the concepts that you're trying to get forward that could help people. So I don't get that too much. We need support for these things across the board and across the aisle. And lastly, I'd say it sounds like, my friend Mr. Hearn brought up E-Verify. That's not really biometrically applied at this time. Employers like you should be able to know who you're dealing with, and if it is somebody who's not lawfully to be in that job, then you should not be penalized for going along with the program when others don't. So that needs to be more uniform as well. But the president last week, I believe it was, came out with an updated program for immigration based on merit. And it seems like what he's trying to do would be helpful to what your needs are. To have more people coming to America legally, and we do that 1 million times every year. We're the most generous country in the world. Come here legally based upon merit, with skills, speak the language, assimilation, all these things that are going to help them get in, be good Americans right from the beginning, contribute to our society, sustain themselves, not be on social welfare programs down the line. Do any of you have any thoughts about the president's policy on merit-based immigration?
Congressman, thanks for that question. I think the president's proposal was a step in the right direction. We do need more high-skilled workers. I'd say let's proceed with some caution on the merit-based system. Canada and Australia have merit-based systems, and they've run into some issues where there's a mismatch between who comes in and the needs of industry. We have a demand-driven, industry-driven system where a person's principal merit is an American company wants to hire them and put them to work. The other aspect of the president's plan, he didn't really address, the workers that could work for Mr. Sabino's company may not meet the president's test of merit, and yet they have a lot of merit for small businesses trying to expand and meet their customers' needs. So I think there's some real caution due in proceeding in that area.
Yeah, we appreciate the fact that we're taking steps and we're talking about immigration, but the president's plan would be exclusive of a typical roofing installer. So it would not.
The president's plan, though, doesn't call for 100% merit-based. It just moves it up the ladder to about 3/4.
There are
not excluding people that you're talking about.
It's for highly skilled. My understanding, it's a preliminary plan, but my understanding is that it's for highly skilled individuals. We need critical skills, so it would not benefit us as it is currently presented.
That's not my understanding, but anyway, go ahead, sir.
Today, that would have no bearing on why I'm here on the H-2B program. So.
Okay.
In addition to some of the comments that were already raised, I'd be curious to see more details about the proposal. I think there's a lot of evidence that folks who arrive without full fluency in English are able to acquire English and learn that over time as they're here, but are able to work and contribute in the meantime. To your earlier points about sort of tracking, I definitely think things like an entry-exit system, for example, border security should be part of an overall package, like the one that was passed back in 2014 through the Senate Comprehensive Immigration Reform. The comment I hear most often from employers about E-Verify is that it's no secret that there are undocumented workers in our economy. Roughly a third of agricultural workers are undocumented. Without pairing that with a way for workers to arrive through a legal process, it wouldn't really address the underlying challenges. And in addition, sometimes E-Verify may misidentify folks who are U.S. citizens as unauthorized to work.
We should have a legal program to have people here fill those jobs, and so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. We now recognize the gentle lady from California Ms. Chu, Chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Investigation, Oversight, and Regulations, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Griswold, I was impressed by your knowledge of the employment-based visa system. Each year, only 140,000 permanent employment-based visas are available under the Immigration and Nationality Act, but the backlog is enormous. Currently, there are 395,000 individuals residing in the U.S. whose applications for a permanent employment-based visa has been approved by USCIS, but who are still waiting for an adjustment of status. And there's an additional 113,000 individuals outside the U.S. who are waiting for status adjustment. Clearly, something needs to be done to clear the backlogs. And even though there is this backlog, the visas that are not used are not rolled over into the next year. Instead, they're dropped. So next month, I plan on reintroducing my Reuniting Families Act, which has a provision to recapture unused employment-based visas from 1992 to 2016 and allows unused visas in future years to automatically roll over into the next year. And the data shows that this would make 326,000 permanent employment-based visas available. In your opinion, what impact would this provision have on small businesses?
It would be, thank you, Congresswoman. It would be beneficial for small business. They need workers just like larger businesses do. I think that combined with raising the number of employment-based visas, I think excluding spouses and minor children from the cap. And Congresswoman, we need to be able to get rid of these per-country quotas where a lot of those backlogs come from. You know, basically it limits green cards for any one country to about 25,000, which is a binding constraint on immigrants from Mexico, the Philippines, China, and India. And so people are turned away from green cards, not because they aren't qualified or lack merit, but solely on the country that they're from. And I think there is majority bipartisan support. There was over 300 co-sponsors in the House for a bill that would have done away with those quotas. I think all of that together, along with that idea you outlined, would be a giant step forward.
And I really want to thank you for addressing the per-country cap issue. In fact, my Reuniting Families Act would raise the per-country cap from 7% to 20%, and I think it would help to solve this backlog problem very, very in a very big way. So thank you for that. Mr. Wallace, I wanted to address the merit-based system. Of course, President Trump's system would drastically reduce family-based visas in favor of a merit-based program. Right now, the visas are 66% family-based and 12% employment-based. But Trump wants to reverse this so that 66% of the visas are merit-based, but merit-based as defined by President Trump, meaning they would all be highly skilled, with high education, with high English proficiency, and have also passed a civics test. So, first of all, I would like to point out that our current family-based visa system is the people that are coming over are more highly educated than the average American. And I've also observed that those coming from family-based visas create significant jobs, even those who do not have English proficiency. I always remember the story of Jerry Yang, who did not speak a word of English except for the word shoe, but went on to found Yahoo and countless jobs. So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned in your testimony that immigrants not only fill shortages in the labor market, but also create jobs for Americans at every job level. Can you expand on the variety of labor needs in this country?
So I understand your question is about the role of immigrants as entrepreneurs. Yeah. So I mean, if you look at the sort of share of the population overall, as I said, about 13% of the U.S. is foreign-born. Immigrants are overrepresented as entrepreneurs, so they're about 20% of our entrepreneurs, and that's true across all types of industries. So in terms of STEM, I think I shared a statistic about the fact that close to half of Silicon Valley high-tech firms were founded by immigrants, but also Main Street businesses. So if you look at communities across the country, if you look at Dayton, Ohio, if you look at Anchorage, Alaska, if you look anywhere across the country, country. Immigrants are starting grocery stores, restaurants, retail businesses. That creates a lot of economic activity and makes those places more interesting and more vibrant, and grows their economies. And as I also said, immigrants are not only coming in as job creators and not only as workers, but as consumers, and so they have a lot of spending power that can contribute to that economic growth as well.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentle lady yields back, and Mr. Stover from Minnesota, ranking member of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Infrastructure, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And to Ranking Member Shabbat, I couldn't agree with you more on the visas, the H-1 and H-2s. So northern Minnesota, we have a lot of seasonal workers, a lot of resorts. If you go to the North Shore of Lake Superior, it's extremely vibrant for about 7 months out of the year. And I've been told by those small businesses, the owners, which I am also a small business owner in the city of Duluth, but they're talking about that seasonal worker. They need that workforce. In fact, one resort had talked about they weren't able to expand because they didn't have the workers to support the expansion. So I would just say this is more of a comment to the H-2B temporary worker visas. I know in our district, and I'm hearing across the country, that we need more of that, the seasonal workers that do a fantastic job, not only with our farmers on the western edge of the district, but our resort area, resort owners, and then on North Shore of Lake Superior. So I'm hearing, would it be safe to say that all 4 of the witnesses today would support the extension of the H-2B visas, the allocation, the additional allocation?
Yeah, without a doubt, that needs to be done. But again, this has been talked about for the past 2 years. And every year as we go into the preparing phase, which for us, the preparing phase is September 1st, it's just so difficult to plan if Congress don't take hold of the situation and say, this is what the need is, this is what we will do.
So you want certainty from Congress?
Yes.
Congressman, I would suggest a series of reforms. Issue more H-2B visas so that we don't have to have this ridiculous scrum on the application date, and small businesses will always come out on the short end of that. Secondly, reduce the paperwork, which again puts small businesses at a disadvantage. Big company can hire more lawyers and people to process it. I think Congress should look at expanding it beyond the seasonality. Some businesses have a seasonal nature, but roofing, as we just heard, that isn't seasonal in a lot of the country, and so it's a bit of a mismatch there. Dairy farmers, I'm from the Midwest, Wisconsin and Minnesota, that's not a seasonal enterprise, and they can't find the workers they need. So those would be some great reforms for small businesses across America.
Thank you, Mr. Sabino.
We would like to see, we would obviously like to see more H-2B visas issued. However, we would also like to see a more comprehensive approach to immigration reform. I mentioned H.R. 1740 earlier. We have to address the TPS issue. We have to address DACA. There's got to be a broader approach because, you know, one of the problems with H-2B visas, roofers tend to migrate within the country, and that's not. We're not able to do that on an H-2B visa. So if somebody owned a roofing company in Minnesota and they were going down to Iowa or Nebraska to do some work over the wintertime, that H-2B visa is useless for them. So,
Mr. Wallace?
Yeah, I would just echo the point about DACA and TPS in particular, in addition to some of these temporary worker programs, that there are more than 1 million people already working at all skill levels. And so obviously taking those folks out of the economy could be disastrous.
Mr. Griswold, you talk about the certainty. As a small business owner myself, and hearing from others, that's what they're looking for from the federal government, certainty. The uncertainty is the apprehension for not hiring or not even going in business or leaving the business altogether. And I think I really appreciate your comments from your experience, it just follows what Ranking Member Shabbat talked about, the ability to have the discussion on allowing these workers to come in legally. I mean, every one of you talked about legally, and I think that's what we can agree on. And we do have work to do, but I appreciate all your comments. Thank you. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. And Mr. Evans from Pennsylvania, Vice Chair of the committee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I again appreciate you for showing your leadership on this issue, for leading this, and then I'd like to thank all of the witnesses who are presenting to us today. An issue that I'm very much interested in, and we discussed it on the Ways and Means Committee, is concern regarding workers' protections, which we talk about in the trade agreement. As you look at ways to improve our nation's immigration systems and address labor shortages through these programs, how can we incorporate workers' rights and protections in this discussion? I'm interested. Through the whole panel we can go through.
Yeah, Congressman, thank you. Thank you for that question. I'm not going to weigh into the details of that, but I will say that I think the best worker protection for immigrant workers is being legal and being able to move from one employer to another. So if the conditions and the pay aren't good, they can move to another employer and enjoy that competition. Also, that's another argument for, I know it's a thorny issue, but finding some way to legalize the 10 million here who are undocumented. 2/3 of them have been here for 10 years or more. They're woven into the fabric of their workplace and their community. And by becoming legal, research shows that their pay goes up, their protections in the workplace are enhanced, and that lifts the whole lower pay segment of the workforce.
So when you're talking about worker protections, again, I'm back to HR 1740. There are worker protections in the bill itself. I think also one of the things in regards to workers' protection is our pro certification program, which we're training employees on how to be safe, on how to do things properly. So I think the comprehensive training and education that we're doing at the National Roofing Contractors Association and the protections in HR 1740 would address your concerns.
I think the present H-2B program has an inordinate amount of protection for the worker, and I think the DOL managed that well. The unfortunate thing is often it's not everybody's situation to pay those workers the way they should be paying them. So I think with our company, it's almost that we are the largest at what we do, so we get under the microscope, and I think the protection for the H-2B workers we bring in is actually very good.
And I would just echo Mr. Griswold's comment that helping folks and allowing them to legalize their status here in the U.S. Would provide a number of protections. And also to reinforce one of the points I made earlier, which is that in terms of U.S.-born workers, an increase in diversity in metropolitan areas is associated with higher wages and more job creation, both for large and small businesses. So I think we need to stop thinking about this as a zero-sum game and think about the opportunity that's created by an influx of workers into a lot of these metro areas.
I come from the city of Philadelphia, which is the home of the leading health facilities, Children's Hospital, University of Pennsylvania, Temple Hospital, Einstein, Jefferson. Healthcare professionals and the people served are very important to me. The question I want to ask is, can you please explain to us what do we risk by losing in our healthcare industry if we don't find effective ways to address this shortage?
Yes, Congressman, immigration is very important to the U.S. healthcare sector. I had a minor heart procedure a couple of months ago, and it just reminded me of the diversity of the healthcare from the nurses to the doctors and the staff. And as I mentioned, the H-1B program, we have a J-1 visa waiver for doctors and that sort of thing. Congress should look to expand those programs, maybe do away with the cap for H-1B visas in the healthcare sector, as we do in my field of education and nonprofits. Nursing is an important category. Some of the nurses may not qualify under H-1B, and yet they have critical skills. So I think Congress should look at all of that. We have growing healthcare needs in this country as the baby boomers retire. You're exactly right. This is something important we need to do to deliver high-quality healthcare to the American people.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're back to bounce my time.
The gentleman yields back, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Snyder, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I want to actually pick up on the comments of my colleague from Pennsylvania on the healthcare shortage. And we're also seeing a severe shortage of physicians, expected to be as many as 120,000 by the year 2030. And I like to say some of my friends who are doctors are saying I'm reaching the time in my career when I'm ready to retire. And as a baby boomer, I say to them, I'm reaching the point in my life where I'm just hitting my stride as a patient. You can't retire. We need to have these doctors, but I live in Chicago. It's one issue. In rural communities and other medically underserved areas, this is reaching potentially crisis levels. And immigration may be an excellent way to find this talent, especially because so many of the world's best and brightest are coming to our shores, to our schools to get their education. But our immigration laws, or outdated laws, stifle industries like the ones you've been talking about. They force us to turn away so many qualified, good people, including physicians, every year who want to stay in the United States, whether starting their business or developing their healthcare, their physician's practice. Today, I actually reintroduced legislation, the Conrad State 30 and Physician Access Act, with my colleague from Iowa and fellow committee member, Ms. Finkenauer. The Conrad State 30 program allows foreign doctors studying at medical schools, it grants them a visa if they serve in some of these medically underserved areas for at least 3 years. The legislation would extend the program and expand the number of physician slots in each state. But it would also ensure that these communities have access to the qualified, talented workforce that they so desperately need. So to the panelists here today, I want to thank you for sharing your perspective. And I know we have to do so much more to develop this, and healthcare is just a piece of it with the baby boom aging. I know that, Mr. Wallace, you mentioned it in your opening remarks. Ms. Griswold, you touched on it. I'm happy to open it up to anyone on the panel if you want to touch on this.
I could just add a couple of things. Looking at the role of immigrants in some of these occupations, actually, if you look at both physicians and surgeons as well as nursing and home health aides, immigrants are twice as likely as the U.S.-born to be in those occupations, and that in some rural counties across the country, there's fewer than 10 doctors for every 100,000 residents, so it certainly is reaching crisis levels.
Great, thank you. Mr. Griswold?
I think expanding the Conrad visa waiver, J-1 visa waiver, is a good approach, both expanding the number, and I understand that has to be re-approved by Congress each year, and maybe adding to the certainty by a longer approval. Also, this is where the per-country quotas start to bite. You have qualified, for example, Indian doctors who have every qualification for a green card to continue to practice medicine here, and they have to go back solely because they were born in India. And we've reached the green card cap on that. So doing away with the per-country quotas or raising it at least would also address critical healthcare needs.
Right. Great. Mr. Sabino, did you want to say?
Yes, sir. Certainly. We recognize the diversity in the healthcare field. We also should recognize the diversity. Have you had a roof put on or any kind of construction project lately? There's a lot of diversity in the roofing industry as well. So we want immigration to be inclusive of our industry as well.
Well, let me shift gears and touch on that, and I appreciate your comment. It's not just the roofing industry. Before this hearing, I was at a meeting conversation talking about the importance of franchising, but franchises are a way for entrepreneurs to enter into the business world by starting a business with the help of a franchisor. Many of these often are immigrants as well. So many of the fields we have, whether it's looking for employees or entrepreneurs trying to get that kickstart, immigrants are critical to that. So, Mr. Shore, if you want to jump in.
I would just like to add, and maybe this is just too commonsensical, right now we have an OPT program. We also apply for H-1Bs. This year, 200,000 applications for 85,000 slots. And these people who have been in the United States, studied for 4 years, got a degree, because they do not get through the lottery, now they have no other option apart from going back to school and now doing a fake master's degree on their second master's degree. So to me, it would be simple to look at that situation, and while the cap is such a problem, maybe extend that CPT program for a 2-year program so at least they have an opportunity.
Great. Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
I recognize the gentleman who's chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access from the great state of New Jersey, Mr. Kim.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and thank you to the gentleman from Pennsylvania for yielding over to me. I just wanted to, first of all, thank the panel for coming out and sharing your insights here. I mean, certainly from my district's point of view, everything we can do to try to help small businesses, fill these critical job needs is so important. And, I wanted to just kind of hone in on the temporary visa program, and I'll keep this brief. But I'm just trying to get a sense from my own end of just, some of the different perspectives that are out there. Certainly as a district that has Jersey shoreline, I've heard about this from some of the businesses on that end. But Mr. Sabino, you kind of added a different perspective I haven't heard from before. So I just kind of wanted to ask for your insights as someone who's a small business owner or a roofing company. Some of the concerns that I hear about, especially from certain labor groups about the temporary visa program, is about the downward pressure that it might put on wages and working conditions. And this is something I've talked about to some of the businesses in my district and hear from them their perspectives. But I guess I just wanted to hear from yours, since this is your business is a different one than the ones I've had a chance to talk to. What is your perspective on that, and in particular on the roofing industry, which utilizes a fair and sizable number of temporary visas? What are some of the steps that are being taken so that we're trying to do what we can to look out for American jobs, American workers as well?
Sure. So when it comes to American workers, again, I testified earlier about the compliment that immigrants do for this. Our pay is based on merit. Can you perform the work safely? Can you do it productively? Do you have good interactions with a customer? Can you install something in a quality manner as a craftsman? So we have merit-based pay systems, not pay based on national origin or anything like that. I will say American wages, the downward pressure on American wages, I hear that a lot. And I just want to comment, I had a conversation with our commercial sales manager about 3 weeks ago. And I talked to him and I said, you can't sell anything. Your entire team, you can't sell anything for the rest of the summer because we're full. And when you talk about wages, that's money right out of their pocket. That's sales commissions that they're not getting because they're not going to sell anything. We're at, our production capacity is full. Also, up and down our supply chain, when you talk about American wages being affected, American wages are being reflected through our distributors and our manufacturers who were flat last year. The economy's booming. Our backlog is growing. The demographics just don't support where American workers are going to get this work done. So our supply chain, we came to Washington, D.C. in April. We came with our roofing day in D.C., and we came with one voice: manufacturers, distributors, contractors, all speaking towards the immigration issue and towards career and technical education. So we had over 400 people come to D.C. and the entire industry is united around this, but that's what's affecting American wages, the inability for us to get the roof projects completed.
No, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. I always just want to make sure that when we're having these discussions here on the Hill and as I'm having these discussions in my own district, that we're really able to make sure that we're reflecting your voices and your perspectives on this, going into it. So that was just important for me to hear directly from you of just how it's been affecting your industry, and certainly be something that I kind of wrap into some of the other discussions that I've been having. So I appreciate that. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for yielding back. And now I go to the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Innovation Workforce Development, Ranking Member Boston from Ohio.
Thank you, Chairman Evans. It's good to see you in the big chair there, so thank you. We're up here having fun, aren't we? Again, and I spoke to all of you earlier before Representative Shabbat got here, and just, I want to express to you, thank you all for being here very much. I really appreciate it, and I won't repeat it again, but I really want to emphasize this today and the concern that's out there for workforce development, and that's one of the biggest things that I face back in the district, and I have a great relationship with Chairman Crow. Jason and I are going to work together and on this innovation and workforce development, and we need your help in coming up with some of these solutions. As I said earlier, Ohio now has a 3.3 unemployment, which is the same as the national average here in this country, and that's a good problem to have, but we need more workers for jobs to be filled. So I understand the need for raising the caps on H-1B and employment-based green cards, but I think this only addresses half the problem. Mr. Sabino brings up a good point that a solution to the labor shortage would ideally be fixed through a two-track approach. As ranking member of the Innovation Workforce Development, I am also a big supporter of career and technical education, as it means so much added to our domestic workforce. So my question for Mr. Griswold and Mr. Sabino is, how do we here in Congress balance the development, enhancement of both our domestic and foreign workforces so that we have healthy growth and opportunity in each, rather just in one dominating the other?
Mr. Congressman, I think you put your finger on exactly the issue Congress should be focusing on, not restricting immigration, but equipping Americans to take full advantage of the opportunities being created in our 21st century economy and workforce development and all that. I'll just echo what's been said here several times, that immigrant workers tend to complement American workers. American workers have certain native advantages, language skills, and as immigrants come in, even lower skilled Americans have opportunities to move up and be, say, the manager of the roofing team or something like that. Studies show that as the presence of immigrants rises, Americans are more likely to stay in school. Just by getting a high school diploma and going out in the workforce, you're giving yourself a 35% pay increase from what you'd be giving going out without a high school degree. And immigration helps encourage Americans to do that. So that's the right conversation to be having. How can we equip ourselves through education? Everybody doesn't need a college degree, associate degree, technical training, that sort of thing. That's exactly what Congress and the committee should be focusing on. Thank you.
I will say that our native-born population is trending away from the trades. It's really sad. Tradesmen are sometimes treated as second-rate individuals. I can promise you the people that I go to work with every day, the men and women, are not second-rate citizens. So the more we can do on that front is certainly welcome, and we are doing a lot, and we're talking with those people. However, the demographics don't look good. No matter how hard we try with career and technical education and promoting the trades for American workers, still in this country, American parents are having 1.8 children per household. We're at a 32-year low birth rate in this country, so native-born workers are becoming less and less. They're joining our industry less and less, so again, we have to look at this as a two-track approach.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back on you just for a second because you said something that you're trying to do some different things. Is there one thing in particular that you and your organization and your company that are doing to attract? I mean, are you going down to the middle school? Are you starting in the high schools? I mean, where are you? What's something? Because I'll give you an example of something that I encountered with a gentleman from Edina, Ohio, with a manufacturing that actually hired a firm to help him think outside the box. But Mr. Sabino, what would be a good example of one thing that you do that you feel is successful?
Sure. So we're in all kinds of schools. We're in high schools. We're in career and technical schools. We're in vocational schools. We are in construction management programs. We have 3 interns right now. Our 3 interns are going to be the next project managers. So we're doing a lot on that front. Again, training. We are training. If an American worker wants a job, we will train you. We will onboard you for 6 weeks. We'll pay you good. We will provide you benefits. We'll provide health insurance, 401k. We will do everything we can for an American worker. We just don't get the applicants, and we spend more money advertising for employees than we do for customers. We don't advertise for customers. Why would you when your backlog is 12 weeks?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Look forward to working with you. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for going over.
I thank you. Thank the gentleman. Next person that I'd like to is from the great state of Texas, Mr. Mark Veazey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to ask a question related to what Mr. Sabino mentioned before, and that's the population rate, the birth rate that's happening in our country. Nobody's really talking about that often, particularly when the debates around immigration come up. And so I wanted to ask either one of anybody on the panel, what sort of detail have you looked into that issue? I mean, I think that one of the things that has astonished me that I think people miss was that during the housing bust that happened in the early 2000s, the Mexican-American birth rate plummeted to below the 2.1 that you need to be order to repopulate your society. And right now, there's been a lot of discussions in Russia, for instance, about their population decline that they've had there, and they've done everything they could to try to encourage people to have more kids. It's not working. I think that everyone has probably seen the news stories about Japan, about how they actually sell more adult diapers in Japan than they do kids' diapers now. And that could happen here if we don't really start looking at this issue from all different facets. So if you could just sort of touch on that a little bit more, I think that would be anybody on the panel. Mr. Griswold, please.
Mr. Congressman, thank you. That is a huge issue. Our problem isn't as severe as in Japan and Russia, but we do have a problem. The Pew Research Center recently came out with a report that showed that the pool of native-born Americans who have native-born parents, that is actually shrinking and will shrink by 8 million over the next 15 years or so. So any growth that we have in our population is going to be from immigrants, first and second generation immigrants. Another recent study by Moody Analytics found that 80% of U.S. counties have shrinking working age populations. And it's especially intense in a lot of Midwestern states, New England, not so much Texas, but that. So we literally have a shrinking pool of native-born workers in this country, and we need immigrants if our businesses are going to be able to continue to expand and invest and meet the demands of customers here in the United States and around the world.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. Mr. Sabino, I wanted to ask you, because you talked about the stigma and parents sort of moving their kids away from certain trades and jobs. Have you had a chance to look at the German model? And I know and I don't like everything about that model because I don't really necessarily like the tracking. But it seems like with the pay discrepancies that they have there, they're much smaller there than they are here. So a lot of people think that that's one of the reasons why the trades don't have as much of a stigma in Germany as they do here. Have you looked at pay scale and when we saw a decline in labor unions, for instance, in this country, we saw a big decline in what people brought home in their checks at the end of the week or at the end of the month. have you looked at the pay discrepancies and how that sort of affects how people feel about these jobs?
Sure. To the German model, we actually went to the Roof and Timber Show in Germany last year, and we've had a chance to meet with our German counterparts. So I will say the German model is very successful. Germany, they are the #1 recognized trade. Roofing is the #1 recognized trade in Germany. They are the most respected trade. They also start roofing at the age of 14. They start early. The career and technical education starts very early there. In terms of the pay discrepancies, we're seeing wages go up across the board. I'm not seeing a huge gap in pay. We're seeing wages go up. So,
there's one good book if you have a chance. There are several good books out, but there's a book that was written by 2 professors in the Northeast. It's called "Rescaling America: Learning to Labor in the 21st Century." It's an outstanding book if you have a chance to read it. But that was one of the things that they pointed out was that the white-collar professions and the blue-collar professions in Germany, there's much less of a gap between what people bring home at the end of the month than there is with the white-collar and blue-collar gap here in America. And so that's something that that we should definitely look at in the future.
I will say we do have foremen that make $75,000 a year or more. So it's based on skill, but there are great opportunities in the roofing industry.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. First, I want to thank all of the witnesses for taking time out of your very busy schedules. We really appreciate you coming before this particular committee. As I said on onset, I'm glad we're having this discussion. Our current immigration system is broken and out of sync with the realities of our workforce. Small businesses and farmers are unable to make decisions and are left to bidding among themselves. This is no way of treating our small business community. And as we continue this discussion, it's vital that we not forget the challenges they face every day. I hope this conversation yields thoughtful solutions so that the nation's small employers get the workforce they need to thrive and our country continues its long history recognizing the contribution immigrants bring to our economy. I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and support material for the record. Without objection, so order. And if there's no further business to come before this committee, we adjourn and we thank you very much.